I never wanted to be that neighbor. You know exactly who I'm talking about, the person everyone whispers about during the neighborhood. HOA meetings, the one who causes a scene over the height of a fence. But sometimes drama doesn't look for you. It just buys the property right next door. I'm a 32-year-old landscape architect, and for the last few years, I've poured my absolute heart, soul, and savings into my property located in a quiet, upscale suburban neighborhood just on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. My backyard wasn't just a patch of grass with some patio furniture. It was my sanctuary. Over 3 years, I transformed it into a meticulously designed, sustainable botanical masterpiece filled with rare, mature Japanese maples, imported automated irrigation systems, and a microclimate ecosystem that was literally featured in architectural magazines. It was appraised at a staggering $2 million. It was my pride, my joy, and my life's work. But then Richard moved in next door. Richard was a newly retired, incredibly entitled tech executive who bought the modern mansion adjacent to my property. From day one, he acted like he owned the entire zip code. He didn't just want a nice view from his second-story balcony. He wanted complete, absolute control over what I did on my own land. Within 2 weeks of moving in, he knocked on my door and bluntly told me that my botanical garden looked cluttered and was ruining his minimalist, concrete aesthetic. He demanded I tear down over half of my rare trees because they allegedly blocked a sliver of his sunset view. When I politely but firmly told him no, his face turned bright red. That's when the nightmare began. He started sending fake HOA violations, calling the city code enforcement every single week, and even throwing harsh chemical weed killers over my fence to ruin my plants. But his final, ultimate power move came on a Tuesday morning when a process server knocked on my door and handed me a thick manila envelope. Richard was officially suing me for property devaluation and demanding a court order to bulldoze my $2 million garden. He thought his massive bank account could bully a single woman and buy the legal system. He thought he had already won. But Richard had no idea about the massive legal trap he was walking into, or how the court was about to turn his entire life upside down. The moment I looked at those court papers, my stomach dropped, but a cold wave of anger immediately followed. Richard wasn't just looking for a compromise. He was looking for total destruction. The lawsuit claimed that my botanical garden was a public nuisance, an unapproved structure under municipal codes, and that it was actively devaluing his multi-million-dollar modern home. He was demanding that the city force me to bulldoze the entire landscape at my own expense, plus pay him $50,000 in emotional damages. It was insane, vindictive, and completely fabricated. But in the U.S. legal system, even a baseless lawsuit can ruin your life if you don't fight back with everything you've got. I knew I couldn't handle this alone, so I immediately hired Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense property attorney based out of downtown Austin. When Sarah reviewed the case, she looked across her desk at me and said, "He's trying to paper you to death. He thinks you'll run out of money for legal fees and settle," but as we dug deeper into the local Texas property statutes and my own meticulous records, Sarah's expression changed from concern to a sharp, knowing smile. "Richard just made a fatal mistake," she whispered. "He thinks he's playing chess, but he doesn't even know the rules of the board. You see, before I ever planted a single seed or imported a single stone, I had spent months obtaining ironclad permits from the city of Austin. Because my garden featured rare, protected plant species and an advanced, eco-friendly drainage system that actually prevented neighborhood flooding, it was classified under a special municipal environmental conservation clause. Not only was it 100% legal, but the city actually viewed my property as an asset to the local watershed. Richard's aggressive attempts to sabotage my yard weren't just petty neighborly disputes, they were potential violations of state environmental protection laws. But instead of revealing our hand early, Sarah advised me to play along and let Richard dig his own grave. For the next 3 months, the legal warfare escalated. Richard's lawyers flooded us with aggressive deposition requests, ridiculous demands for soil testing, and threatening letters. Every single hour of my attorney's time was costing me hundreds of dollars, draining my savings. It was mentally exhausting. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, looking out my window at my beautiful, peaceful garden, wondering if next month it would all be reduced to dirt and concrete. Richard would stand on his balcony, holding his coffee, smirking down at me whenever I was outside. He genuinely believed his wealth made him invincible. He thought he was going to walk into that courtroom and watch me beg for mercy. But what Richard didn't realize was that my attorney and I had been quietly gathering a mountain of undeniable, high-definition evidence that was about to turn his expensive lawsuit into his worst financial nightmare. The morning of the hearing at the Travis County Courthouse was suffocatingly hot. I sat at the defense table, my hands trembling slightly, clutching a folder tightly against my chest. Across the aisle sat Richard, looking incredibly smug in a custom-tailored suit, flanked by two high-priced corporate attorneys. He didn't even look at me. He just smirked at the judge, acting like this entire proceeding was just a minor formality before he got his way. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Martinez, called the court to order. Richard's lead attorney stood up with an air of absolute confidence. For nearly 20 minutes, he painted me as a reckless, rogue homeowner whose overgrown, chaotic jungle was a direct violation of community standards, a breeding ground for pests, and a hazard to neighboring property values. He presented heavily manipulated, angled photographs of my perimeter bushes to make them look wild and invasive. Richard smirked again as his lawyer confidently wrapped up, demanding an immediate court order for total demolition. When it was our turn, my attorney Sarah stood up with total calmness. "Your Honor," she began, walking over to the projector screen. "The plaintiff has focused entirely on aesthetics. We would like to focus on the law and the facts." Sarah first displayed my certified, city-stamped permits, proving every inch of the garden was authorized. Then, she pulled up the official state appraisal. My garden wasn't a mess. It was a $2.2 million asset. But that was just the warm-up. Sarah looked directly at Richard. "The plaintiff claims my client's garden is a nuisance. But what he failed to mention is his own criminal disregard for the law." Sarah clicked a remote, and a crystal-clear, high-definition video filled the screen. It was night vision footage from the hidden security cameras I had installed in my trees. The entire courtroom went dead silent. The video clearly showed Richard walking along the fence line at 2 a.m., holding a massive industrial sprayer, deliberately dousing my rare, imported Japanese maples with potent herbicide. Richard's face instantly drained of all color. He bolted upright, stammering, That's edited! That's an invasion of my privacy." Judge Martinez slammed her gavel down so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Vance," she boomed, her eyes flashing with rage. The hunter had officially become the hunted. The silence in the courtroom after that video played was absolutely deafening. Richard's high-priced lawyers, who had been aggressively leaning over the table just moments before, suddenly slouched down, looking completely defeated. They knew the case was instantly dead in the water. Judge Martinez did not hold back. She didn't just dismiss Richard's absurd lawsuit against me. She practically tore him apart from the bench. She called his actions predatory, malicious, and an appalling abuse of the legal system to bully a neighbor over personal aesthetics. But dismissing the case was just the beginning. My attorney, Sarah, immediately filed a massive countersuit for property destruction, emotional distress, and legal fees, because Richard had been caught on camera deliberately poisoning rare, legally protected plants under the state's Environmental Conservation Clause. The damages were calculated at 3 times their actual value. Within weeks, the court delivered a crushing final verdict. Richard was ordered to pay me over $400,000 in restitution for the destroyed botanicals, cover 100% of my attorney fees, and pay significant punitive damages for filing a frivolous lawsuit. On top of the financial ruin, the city hit him with massive environmental fines for dumping toxic chemicals near a protected watershed. He had tried to use his wealth and status to crush me, but his arrogance ended up costing him nearly $500,000. The humiliation didn't stop in the courtroom either. Because court records are public, the local Austin News caught wind of the story. The millionaire tech bro who tried to poison his neighbor's eco-garden. The neighborhood association, which he had tried to manipulate, completely ostracized him. He couldn't even walk to his mailbox without getting cold stares from the entire street. Less than 6 months after the judge slammed her gavel, there was a bright blue "For sale" sign planted right in his meticulously manicured, boring front yard. Richard sold his house at a loss and moved out, completely defeated. I finally got my sanctuary back. My garden is thriving again, healthier and more beautiful than ever, completely free from the toxic energy that once loomed right over the fence. Looking back, I realized something profound. Bullies rely on your fear. They weaponize their resources because they expect you to fold. Richard thought because I was just a single woman who loved plants, I wouldn't have the strength or the grit to stand up to him. But the truth is, your home is your boundary, and you must protect your peace at all costs. Never let someone else's entitlement make you feel small in your own space. If you know you are in the right, keep your head down, document absolutely everything, and let their own arrogance be the shovel they use to dig their own grave. Sometimes the quietest people grow the strongest roots.